professional and academic bodies. It will be our privilege to hear ma'am on the topic strengthening governance under Part 4 of the Indian Constitution. So now, without further ado, let me request Priti ma'am to come and enlighten us. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renu. It's nice to see you there. And Dr. Subhash, Dr. Dubey, the director of the HRDC Jodhpur. And it's a privilege for me also to share my thoughts on the very important topic, which is related to the theme of this refresher course. And as I have been earlier told that because the participants are from all over India, so it is going to be in a bilingual manner. So बीच में थोड़ा हिंदी भी होती रहेगी, but mostly it would be in English. Rightly told by Dr. Renu that the topic for today's discussion is strengthening governance under the Part 4 of the Indian Constitution. So I'll not be going into details as to what are different provisions, because the participants may be belonging to different streams, different disciplines. They are not directly from the law stream. So that would be a general discussion on how the governance is being strengthened by the different provisions of the Constitution of India. And as the topic suggests, it is strengthening governance, and the second is Part 4 of the Indian Constitution. So I will just try to unpack the, first of all, the constitutional provisions. Those are aimed at the governance and good governance, including the meaning of the governance. And secondly, basically Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, that is known as the Directive Principles of the State Policy. And then how these directive principles of the state policies are strengthening the governance. So the idea is just to make this discussion within the boundaries of the constitutional law. Now, so far as the Constitution of India is concerned, this is the guiding light on the matters connected with the governance. And you see that the Constitution is not only an ideal document, but this is an admiration to a solid commitment on the part of the government. As I was going through the news item in our social media also, that many of the thoughts have already been given on the governance and how it is working, what is good governance, what is bad governance. So this is all, I think that the participants are aware about as to what is governance. But you see that the ability of the Indian Constitution is just to act as the limitations on the exercise of power. Because as I told you that the Constitution is an ideal document which is laying down the provisions relating to the governance. But at the same time, it is also giving certain limitations on the exercise of these powers. And this is also delineated the functions of the government and outlined the rights of the people. The entire experience, if you see, of almost 73 years of the constitutional governance, that can help us to understand the working of the Constitution and relatedly the governance of the country. So there are primarily two types of the governance system. One is known as the parliamentary form of the governance, and the other is as the presidential form of the governance. So Indian Constitution has established a parliamentary form of the government. हमारी एक संसदीय शासन प्रणाली है जिसको कि हमने अडॉप्ट किया है. And this system is similar for both the central and the state governments. दोनों में ही एक सा गवर्नेंस का रूल है. And democracy, the rule of law and good governance, these are the key elements for any governance. And India is not an exception, because these three links or these three elements, democracy, rule of law, and the good governance, which are the key elements, they are essential, very essential for the existence of an ideal state. As I am going to speak about part 4th of the Constitution, which is related to the welfare concept of the state, which is providing for the social justice, economic justice. That is, these are the norms which bring forth the ideal state. And in that, this democracy, rule of law, and governance are the key elements, and as well as very, very essential parts. So democracy provides a conducive and stimulating environment for the rule of law. Just as to how the rule of law can thrive in the country, democracy is required for that. So while the rule of law sustains a democracy, then we see that good governance also promotes these both, democracy as well as the rule of law in the country. It is not only, giving or promoting the democracy or rule of law, but it is also strengthening the same. So the three elements, that is the democracy, good governance, and rule of law, these three are very important for the purpose of having the system of governance which may work for the welfare of the common man, welfare of the country. This is how we can see from the lens of the Constitution the strengthening of the governance. Now, regarding the social, political, and economic life of the people, this is transformed in a democratic framework that is also leading to the good governance. So part 4 is basically, as I told you, is consisting of social and economic provisions which are relating to the justice to the person concerned. These are the part of the Indian Constitution, and they are also leading for the good governance. Now, there was one historian, constitutional historian, rather I should say, Granville Austin, when he was of the opinion that this transcendent goal of the Indian Constitution was just to promote social revolution. And for this, the framers of the Constitution, or the authors or the makers of the Constitution, they intended to fulfill the basic needs of the citizen. कि आम आदमी की जरूरतें क्या हैं, उनको कैसे पूरा किया जाए, इसके लिए ही ये संविधान की स्थापना हुई, संविधान बना। और साथ ही साथ हम देख सकते हैं कि जो सोशल रिवॉल्यूशन जो हुआ, that is because of this constitutional provisions. So he was also of the opinion that it would bring about the fundamental changes in the structure of the Indian society.
Participants, please mute yourself. Participants, please mute yourself. Just cooperate. Just cooperate. Mute yourself. And please take care of all this in future. Ma'am, kindly go ahead, ma'am. Sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am.
No problem. And there are so many participants, and this basically this refresher course is not for the learning. These refresher courses are only for making the API so that they may get their promotions. This is the only purpose of the refresher courses or the short-term courses which the UGC HRDCs are organizing. So there is nothing like that, because these participants, they may be of different age group, different disciplines. They may not be aware of the things. The only purpose is that just to get the certificate and then to get the promotion. This is the only purpose. Well, I was discussing about the Glanville, this Austin's view on this constitutional governance.
I request all the participants to please stay muted. Please keep yourself muted. Turn off your mic. All the participants are requested to turn off their mic, please, so that it will help us to run the session smoothly. Okay. Please go ahead now.
So what we see is that Granville Austin, he was of the opinion that the Indian constitution is just to promote the social revolution. And for this, the authors of the Indian constitution, they also intended to fulfill the basic needs of the citizens, the basic needs of the person concerned. And they also hope that it would bring about fundamental changes in the structure of the society. If everybody would get its due, the basic needs are to be fulfilled, then there would be no anarchy and the governance would be on the right direction. So the thread of the social revolution runs throughout the proceedings and the documents of the Constituent Assembly. जब संविधान बनाया जा रहा था, जिस समय उसका ड्राफ्टिंग चल रही थी, तो उस समय भी सोशल पॉलिसीज को लेके, सोशल जस्टिस को लेके बहुत इसमें डिबेट्स हुए, और जो हमारा संविधान निकल कर आया, that was consisting of the provisions which are relating to promote the social justice in the common man. So the theme formed the basis of the decision to adopt the parliamentary form of government. And direct elections are to be there, the fundamental rights to the person are to be given, the directive principles of the state policies, and many of the executive, legislative and judicial provisions are the part of the constitution. ये सारी ही चीजें हमें अपने संविधान में दिखाई देती हैं. So the social revolution theme that was running throughout the constitution, but specifically if we see part 3rd and part 4th, that is fundamental rights and the directive principles of the state policy, they demonstrate the core of this commitment. जो social revolution का जो main मुद्दा है, वो हमें part 3rd और part 4th में basically दिखाई देता है. Part 3rd that speaks of the fundamental rights, जो हमारे मौलिक अधिकार हैं, मूल अधिकार हैं, और डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ द स्टेट पॉलिसी जो पार्ट 4th है कि राज्य के नीति निर्देशक तत्व क्या होंगे, गवर्नेंस किस तरीके से काम करेगी, कैसे कानून बनाए जाएंगे, कैसे उनको लागू किया जाएगा. So this all demonstrate the commitment towards the social justice, towards the social revolution, which was the viewpoint of Glenway Austin. So these are perceived as the conscience of the constitution. This part 3rd and part 4th, basically, they are the main conscience of the Constitution of India, because they provide the base for the human rights, for the human development policies and governance also. Because the part 3rd is related to the human rights, which are related for the human development policies also, and second part, that is part 4th, directive principles of the state policy, that is related to the governance, and that are aimed again for the human development policies. कि किस तरीके से मानव विकास के लिए क्या क्या नीतियां बनाई जाएंगी, उसमें किस तरीके से काम होगा, क्या कानून बनाया जाएगा, गवर्नेंस का ही एक पार्ट है. ये हम पार्ट 4th ऑफ द इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में देखते हैं. So the constitution ensures that the fundamental rights are guaranteed as a matter of legal obligation rather than as a political concession. कोई ये राजनीतिक रूप से कोई अधिकार नहीं दिए गए हैं, बल्कि इनको एनफोर्स कराया जाता है, कोर्ट के द्वारा इनको एनफोर्स कराया जा सकता है. अगर कहीं कोई उल्लंघन हो रहा है, कोई वायलेशन हो रहा है, तो कोर्ट में जाके इनके लिए रेमेडी प्राप्त की जा सकती है. सो दीज आर कंसिडर्ड टू बी अ लीगल ऑब्लिगेशन, इट इज नॉट द पॉलिटिकल कंसेशन. एंड so far as the provisions of the Indian constitutions are concerned, which strengthens the good governance, then we find that the very preamble speaks about the governance, the fundamental rights speaks about the governance, the directive principles of the state policy speaks about the governance. Besides that, you will find the special provisions for women, children, SC, STs, disabled persons, aged persons. The rights of the minorities are the part of the constitution. Then parliamentary form of the government, rule of law. So these are all the parts of the constitution which are aiming towards strengthening the good governance. And it contains the ideals and aspirations of the constitution. It identifies the primary objective of the good governance. So from this standpoint, good governance would be the governance mechanism that promotes sovereignty, socialism, secularism and democracy, जो हमारी preamble में ही दी गई है. या उसके साथ ही साथ कुछ ethical commitments भी है, justice है, liberty है, equality है, fraternity है. So this is required in everyday life for every citizen. These are the ethical commitments which we find in the preamble to the Constitution of India. And everything which we find therein, that is related to the good governance. The fundamental rights, particularly if I talk about Article 13, then again it gives the power to have a judicial review of all the legislations, whether it is the past legislation or the future legislation, whatever laws are being made, उसको किस तरीके से रिव्यू किया जाएगा, ये पावर दी गई है. तो अगर कुछ गलत किया जा रहा है, कुछ ऐसे कानून बनाए जा रहे हैं जिससे फंडामेंटल राइट्स का वायलेशन हो रहा है, तो वो भी अपने आप में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में इसके लिए प्रावधान किए गए हैं. नाउ कमिंग टू द कंसेप्ट ऑफ गवर्नेंस, we all know that this is not a new concept. It is as old as the human civilization. And basically, governance means the process of decision making. The decision making and also the process by which the decisions are implemented. Now, implemented, then it becomes the good governance, and when it is not implemented, it becomes a bad governance. So simply, if we talk about the governance, it is a process of decision making कि कैसे निर्णय लिए जाएंगे, कैसे जो निर्णय लिए गए हैं उनको इम्प्लीमेंट किया जाएगा, अगर इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हो रहे हैं तो गवर्नेंस कैसी है, इम्प्लीमेंट हो रहे हैं तो गवर्नेंस कैसी है. सो दिस इज सिंपली a process by which the governments are selected, they are monitored and they are replaced also. कि ये जो गवर्नेंस का हिस्सा है इसमें गवर्नमेंट सेलेक्ट भी हो जाती है, इलेक्ट भी हो जाती हैं, वो अपना देखभाल भी करती है कि ठीक तरीके से जो लॉ बनाए गए हैं वो इम्प्लीमेंट हो रहे हैं या नहीं, उनकी पॉलिसीज जो बनी है वो इम्प्लीमेंट हो रही हैं या नहीं. एंड एट द सेम टाइम अगर ठीक तरीके से काम नहीं हो रहा है तो ये रिप्लेस भी हो जाते हैं इन दी इलेक्शन. दैट इज ऑल्सो ए प्रोविजन इन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया कि इलेक्शन होते हैं और इलेक्शन के द्वारा ही सरकारें चुनी जाती हैं. So the capacity of the government to formulate effectively the policies and to implement them is governance. The concept or the respect for the institutions that govern the social and economic communications among the state and its citizens, that is also the part of the governance. But so far as the word governance is concerned, then World Bank in 1994 referred the governance to all manners of exercising control and authority in the allocation of resources. उनका अपना एक अलग पर्पस था वर्ल्ड बैंक का में कि क्या चीजें मिल रही हैं, कितना नहीं मिल रहा है, रिसोर्सेज क्या क्या अवेलेबल है, क्या नहीं है, कैसे रिसोर्सेज का एलोकेशन किया जाएगा, इस सब को लेके गवर्नेंस वर्ड को शुरू किया 1994 में वर्ल्ड बैंक ने. And the term good governance was initially, we can say, made used by the World Bank publication in 1989. कि सत्ता जो है उसका क्या स्वरूप होगा, राजनीतिक सत्ता का प्रारूप या जो पद्धति है कैसे वो प्रजातंत्र में लागू की जाएगी, उसमें सैनिक का शासन रहेगा, निरंकुश का शासन रहेगा, कौन सा तंत्र रहेगा. दिस इज हाउ we see in this shape of the good governance कि सत्ता के प्रयोग के तरीके क्या होंगे, वो तरीके या जो प्रक्रिया जिसके अनुसार हम कह सकते हैं कि आर्थिक सामाजिक विकास के लिए उस सत्ता का प्रयोग किया जा रहा है, उस गवर्नेंस का प्रयोग किया जाता है, ये सारी चीजें. और साथ ही साथ जो सक्षमता है, जो कार्य के निष्पादन करने की क्षमता, these are all the process of the governance. So we see that starting from the World Bank, the international institutions like United Nations Development Programs, UNDP, they also drew attention to certain crucial deficiencies, and these deficiencies in the governance system of the developing countries. So again, they have used the word governance, like non-availability of the information to the people concerned, उनको कोई information नहीं प्राप्त हो रही है, और lack of accountability, poor management in the public sector, or we can say the lack of appropriate legal framework, कि ठीक तरीके से कानून ही नहीं बने. So all these were put in the definition of this governance, that they are considered to be the governance part, good governance. And since then we see that this term governance had become more and more popular. If you see Alexander Pope, उन्होंने कहा था कि वही सरकार अच्छी है जिसका प्रशासन अच्छा हो. तो we are also having the parliamentary form of the governance, but how that government is working, what type of the laws are being implemented, that has to be seen in terms of its monitoring that whether that is good or not. So if we see that all these things are there, then of course there would be good governance. And वही सरकार अच्छी है जिसका प्रशासन अच्छा है, and this is very correctly said by Alexander Pope. अगर इसी को हम देखते हैं अपने इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखें तो बहुत पुराने समय से कौटिल्य का जो अर्थशास्त्र है उसी में कहा गया था कि प्रजा की उन्नति में ही राजा की उन्नति होती है, मीनिंग देयर बाय व्हाटएवर वर्क इज बीइंग डन बाय द गवर्नेंस दैट शुड बी फॉर द betterment of the society, that is for the betterment of the public concern, that is for the betterment of their citizen. तो प्रजा की उन्नति में ही राजा की उन्नति है. इट सिंपली मीन्स कि राजा वही करे, वही कार्य करेगा जिसमें प्रजा की उन्नति होगी, जिसमें उनका विकास होगा. And we can also think of what our राष्ट्रपिता महात्मा गांधी has said also, कि अच्छे शासन के रूप में उन्होंने एक कल्पना की थी, राम राज्य की कल्पना की थी, जिसको स्वराज की बात करी गई. So we see that this is the term governance and good governance, which is having its roots from the ancient time also in different types of the references have been given, not only in India but in other countries also. And we see that this governance is used as good governance and bad governance. Bad governance is regarded as one of the root cause of all the evils in the society. And governance is the exercise of the economic, political and administrative authority that is to manage the affairs at all the levels in the society. कि समाज में जो भी हो रहा है, जो भी चीजें हो रही हैं, चाहे वो इकोनॉमिक लेवल पे हो, चाहे वो पॉलिटिकल लेवल पे हो या शासन प्रशासन से संबंधित हो, उनमें किस तरीके से जो अफेयर्स हैं उसको किस तरीके से मैनेज किया जाएगा. दिस इज हाउ we know as the governance. So it consists of the mechanism, it consists of the processes, it consists of the institutions also. तो institution क्या है, वो किस तरीके से उसको अपनाएंगे, उसको मॉनिटर करेंगे, उसको सेलेक्ट करेंगे और क्या प्रोसीजर फॉलो करेंगे. दिस इज ऑल द पार्ट ऑफ द गवर्नेंस इन विच द citizens groups articulate their interests also, and they exercise their legal rights, they meet their obligations, and also they mediate the differences which are coming up. So without good governance, no amount of developmental schemes can bring in improvement in the quality of life, because the basic purpose of the governance is just, as I told you, is to manage the affairs of the persons in the society. Of all system has to be taken care of. So we see that if there is a good governance, then it is also required that there must be development or there must be developmental schemes which may improve the quality of the life of the person concerned. And strengthening governance is an essential precondition to improve the lives of the poor also, because I am concentrating myself on part 4, which is related to the social revolution, social justice, and for the common man, for the people of India. That's why this is also important, that the governance need to be strengthened, and that can be seen when it is improving the lives of the poor person. So basically, if we talk about the good governance, then there are majorly 8 characteristics of the good governance, which are participation is to be there, participation of all in the governance, the rule of law should be there, the governance should be transparent, that is whatever is being done by the government, that should be done in a transparent manner, that is the transparency has to be there. It should be responsive also towards the public, then it should be consensus oriented, equitable, inclusive. So many major characteristics are there for the good governance, and basically it assures that the corruption is minimized and the views of the all persons, including the minorities, they are also taken into account when the work is going on. And the voices of all the persons who are belonging to the vulnerable groups in the society, those voices must be the part of the mainstream in the decision making. कि जो भी निर्णय लिए जा रहे हैं उसमें उनका भी हिस्सेदारी हो, उनको भी इसमें सहयोग करने के लिए बुलाया जाए. So it is also responsive to the present and future needs of the society. That is how we can make the basic characteristics of the good governance. As I told you that it should be participatory. तो ज्यादा से ज्यादा क्या है कि नागरिकों की जो समान सहभागिता है उसको बढ़ाने पर बल दिया जाए, वो प्रशासन जो है वो सुशासन में आएगा, नागरिकों के साथ किसी तरीके का भेदभाव नहीं हो। और ये देखने में आया है कि शासन में लगभग जो लिंग के आधार पे, वर्ग के आधार पे, जाति के आधार पर जो सुविधाएं जो हैं उनको देने में कहीं ना कहीं डिस्क्रिमिनेशन किया जाता है। तो इस चीजों की इसमें सुशासन में, गुड गवर्नेंस में कोई जगह नहीं होती है, बिकॉज पार्टिसिपेशन has to be by both men and women. That is a key cornerstone of the good governance. Participation could be either direct or it may be through legitimate or intermediate institutions, or that may be through representations. Representatives may also come, because participation needs to be informed and organized. And when it is to be informed and organized, this needs that the freedom of association, freedom of expression, and that must be given to the person concerned on the one hand, and also at the same time there must be an organized civil society that can give way for the persons to know their rights and their viewpoint in the making of the nation. That is to bring the good governance. कि किस तरीके से participation उनका जरूरी है good governance के लिए. Governance में participation, that is one of the very important factor. Then secondly, if we say the rule of law, then good governance requires a very fair legal framework that are enforced impartially. And it is also requiring full protection of the human rights, and particularly those who are vulnerable, who are belonging to the minority sections. And at the same time, the impartial enforcement of laws requires an independent judiciary also. And the equality has to be there. There shall not be any discrimination. So जहाँ तक रूल ऑफ लॉ की बात है, विधि के शासन की बात है, तो शासन के लिए विधि का शासन में एक इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशियरी या स्वतंत्र न्यायपालिका का होना बहुत जरूरी है. जब व्यक्ति अपनी समस्या को लेकर न्याय में जाता है, कोर्ट की शरण में जाता है, कोर्ट के सामने जाता है, तो उससे जरूरी है कि उसको स्पीडी जस्टिस भी मिले, उसको त्वरित न्याय की प्राप्ति होनी चाहिए. तो one important or very powerful judiciary or judicial system that is said to be the foundation or base of any democratic nation, which is also important for the good governance. तो जो लोगों की परेशानियों को दूर करे और उनके लिए न्याय की प्राप्ति करवाए, तो ऐसी एक स्वतंत्र न्यायपालिका अपने आप जरूरी है. रूल ऑफ लॉ का मेजर है, क्योंकि रूल ऑफ लॉ मीन्स दैट no one is above the law. And one has to clearly understand that the rule of law is different from the rule by law. कि विधि का शासन है, विधि के द्वारा जो शासन किया जाता है कि कोई भी रूलर्स जो है वो बैठ के अपना कानून बनाएं और अपने कानून को चलाएं, तो that is not considered to be rule of law. That is ruler's law or rule by law, rule of men in some other words. So law is an instrument of the government, and the government is not above the law. Because the government is taking or deriving the power from the law. वो अपनी जो powers हैं उनको कानून से, constitution से ही प्राप्त कर रहे हैं, तो वो उसके ऊपर नहीं जा सकते. इसलिए rule of law is something which says that the supremacy of law is a very important essential element of rule of law, and that is also one of the characteristic of the good governance that has to be there. Then there shall not be any arbitrariness. किसी भी तरीके की मनमानी पूर्ण तरीके से सरकार कार्य नहीं कर सकती है. ये रूल ऑफ लॉ का अपना एक एसेंशियल टर्म है. तो रूल ऑफ लॉ is very important for the purpose of understanding that there is a governance which is good governance or which is a bad governance. Then another characteristics of this good governance is the transparency. Transparency जिसको हम पारदर्शिता भी कहते हैं. So transparency simply means that the decisions which are taken and their enforcement that are done in a manner which follows the rules and the regulations. वो rules and regulations को follow करते हुए ही कोई decision लिए गए हैं और उनका enforcement किया जा रहा है. इसमें किसी भी तरीके का forceful तरीके से काम नहीं किए जा रहे हैं, कोई जबरदस्ती नहीं की जा रही. इट मीन्स दैट information is freely available to all and directly accessible to all persons, to all those who are affected by the decision, जिनके अगेंस्ट में, जिनके फेवर में डिसीजन लिए जा रहे हैं, जो एनफोर्समेंट किए जा रहे हैं, they all must be aware about these things. They must be having the information and those informations are accessible to them. And it also means that enough information is provided, is provided in we can say easily understandable form. ये ऐसा नहीं है कि जो इन्फॉर्मेशन उनको दी गई है वो उनको समझ में ही नहीं आ रही है, तो ऐसी फॉर्म में हो, ऐसी भाषा में हो कि जिससे कि जो इन्फॉर्मेशन दी गई है वो उनको समझ में भी आ सके. देन तभी हम कहेंगे कि पारदर्शिता है, क्योंकि पारदर्शिता जो है उसमें एक जो हमारी रेगुलर सिस्टम चल रहा था, एंड एट दैट टाइम वी वर हैविंग द ओपिनियन दैट एवरीथिंग इज टू बी केप्ट इन सीक्रेसी. But it is the judiciary which has interpreted that that secrecy has to go and the information or the transparency has to come, because in a democracy secrecy has no meaning except few things. जहाँ पे नेशनल डिफेंस की बात हो या इस तरीके की प्रिवेसी की बात हो, जहाँ पर कुछ चीजों को गोपनीय रखा जाना चाहिए, उसके अतिरिक्त गुड गवर्नेंस में गोपनीयता का कहीं कोई मोल नहीं होता है. तो इसलिए पारदर्शिता या ट्रांसपेरेंसी इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर द गुड गवर्नेंस, क्योंकि गोपनीयता को सुशासन में स्वीकार नहीं किया गया है. एंड अगर हम देखें कि जो देश में हमारे राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन एक्ट आया, दैट इज ओनली बिकॉज ऑफ दिस ट्रांसपेरेंसी, because everything was very kept in confidence, it was confidential, it was secret. But when this right to information act came into, then we find that more and more transparency has been increased, and the decisions which were taken, the points, the facts which were there with the public authorities, those all can be now being informed by the person concerned. कोई भी व्यक्ति right to information act में उसके बारे में सूचना प्राप्त कर सकता है, ऐसी सूचनाएं जो कि किसी एक्सेप्शन में, किसी अपवाद में नहीं आती है. सो वी फाइंड दैट बिकॉज ऑफ दिस पारदर्शिता बढ़ गई, शासन में सही निर्णय लेने का दबाव भी बढ़ा, बिकॉज दे नो that if anyone will ask anything or under this right to information act, then they have to supply the information, and if there would be something wrong, then naturally it would have a bad effect on the governance of the country. So in order to give the information under this right to information act, the governance has also started working in a right direction. इसमें ट्रांसपेरेंसी बढ़ गई है और सही तरीके के डिसीजंस भी आने शुरू हो गए. दिस इज ऑल्सो ए पार्ट ऑफ द गुड गवर्नेंस. देन विश्वसनीयता की अगर हम बात करें, रेस्पॉन्सिवनेस. So good governance requires that institutions and the processes, they try to serve all the stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. There shall not be any delay, or there must be openness there and awareness regarding what the state organs are doing. तो ये अपने आप में क्या है, एक सुशासन में विश्वसनीयता पर ज्यादा बल दिया गया है कि अपने जो केसेस हैं और जो पॉलिसीज हैं उनको पूरी तरीके से इम्प्लीमेंट कराया जाए और उनको जल्दी से जल्दी निर्णय लिए जाएं, उन्हें सही तरीके से सामने लाया जाए, और जब वो नीतियां, वो जो पॉलिसीज बनाई हैं, जब उनको प्रयोग में लाया जाए तो वो पूरी तरीके से वचनबद्ध होकर लागू किए जाए, पूरी विश्वसनीयता के साथ उनको लागू किया जाए, तभी अपने आप में माना जाएगा दैट देयर इज अ गुड गवर्नेंस. विश्वसनीयता और रिस्पॉन्सिवनेस इज ऑल्सो देयर. देन similarly we find consensus oriented is another characteristics of the good governance, which speaks about that there are several actors and many viewpoints is given in the society. So good governance requires a mediation of the different interests of the society to reach a broad consensus in the society on what is the best interest of the whole community and how it can be achieved. कैसे इसको प्राप्त किया जा सकता है, समाज में अधिकांश लोगों के लिए के हित में क्या चीजें हैं, इन सबको देखते हुए कंसेंसस डेवलप करके और उसको कंसेंसस के आधार पर डिसीजन लेना, लॉन्ग टर्म डिसीजन, शॉर्ट टर्म डिसीजन, कि वो डिसीजन जो ले जा रहे हैं दोज मस्ट बी सस्टेनेबल for the human development. All these things, these are to be achieved by the government. That is considered to be major characteristics of the good governance. So this can only result from an understanding of the historical, cultural, and social context of the given society in the community, which we are seeing, witnessing in our country also. Then a major part of a country like India, where we all know that there is a great diversity and we are a plural country. So equity and inclusiveness is another major characteristic where a society's well-being is depending on the ensuring to all its members that they should feel that they are not excluded from the mainstream of the society. And they request that all the groups, particularly those groups which are belonging to the vulnerable groups, they may be the women, they may be the children, they may be the aged persons, they may be the persons with disability, SCs, STs. So they have the opportunity to improve or maintain their well-being. कि वो जैसे समाज में रह रहे हैं उनको वो सारे अवसर प्राप्त हो कि जहां जहां उनकी वल्नरेबिलिटी आगे आती है वो मेन स्ट्रीम का पार्ट नहीं बन पाते हैं, हाउ दे कैन गेट द inclusiveness, how they can be included in the mainstream of the society. They shall not feel that they are excluded. This is also the part of the governance, and we find that the constitution also speaks or provides for this type of the inclusiveness provisions in the constitution. Then effectiveness and efficiency, that is another major characteristic of the good governance, and that simply means that the processes and the institutions that produce the results that meet the needs of the society while making the best use of the resources at their disposal. So whatever provisions are there, whatever resources are there, those are related to the environment also. So natural resources and the protection of environment, how conveniently, how effectively those resources are to be used, that is also very important for the good governance, because the concept of efficiency in the context of good governance covers the sustainable use of the natural resources also, and how they are being given to the person concerned, that is also to be seen effectively, and that has to be very, very efficient. Then accountability. Accountability is the key requirement of any governance and good governance also. Because you see that not only the government institutions, but also the private sectors and the civil societies, organizations, they are also accountable to the public and to their institutional stakeholders. So accountability is very important. What the government is doing, whether it is accountable, whether it is responsible, whether it is answerable to the person concerned or not. Accountability is the basic or the key requirement. And in general, we see the organizations or the institutions, they are accountable to those who will be affected by the decisions or their actions. And simply in the same manner, we see कि जो accountability है, जो उत्तरदायित्व है, ये इतना बड़ा एक सुशासन का महत्वपूर्ण तत्व है कि जब उत्तरदायित्व को नहीं समझा जाएगा तो सुशासन हम उसको प्राप्त नहीं कर सकते, वो हमें प्राप्त नहीं हो सकता है। और ये जो लोकतंत्र में जो विकसित होता है ये वाला तत्व उत्तरदायित्व का, ये अपने आप में इसलिए भी जरूरी है क्योंकि सहभागिता से ही सुशासन को विकसित होने की संभावनाएं बनती हैं। और लोकतांत्रिक संस्थाओं में उत्तरदायित्व अगर नहीं है तो काम का जो इम्प्लीमेंट करने का, एग्जीक्यूशन का, निष्पादन का जो तरीका है वो भी ठीक से नहीं हो सकता है। तो इसलिए उत्तरदायित्व, अकाउंटेबिलिटी इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, एंड अकाउंटेबिलिटी कैन नॉट बी एनफोर्स्ड विदाउट ट्रांसपेरेंसी एंड रूल ऑफ लॉ. सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, and these are the strengthening the elements of good governance in the Constitution of India also. And you see that for understanding that there were certain certain documents also, as you know, Jawaharlal Nehru in his famous the Tryst with Destiny, in his speech on 14th August 1947, he has just articulated these challenges: ending of poverty and ignorance and disease and inequality of opportunities. तो ये सारी चीजें क्या थी कि जो गुड गवर्नेंस के लिए हमें जरूरी है, इन सब चीजों के लिए पहले हमें इसका अंत करना जरूरी है. So the good governance must aim at expansion in the social opportunities and removal of poverty. In short, we can say that good governance is securing justice, empowerment, employment, and efficient delivery of services to all. And almost all these things we have in our constitution, part 4th of the constitution, that is directive principles of the state policy. तो जो कुछ भी मैं बात कर रही हूँ गुड गवर्नेंस की कि उसमें क्या होना चाहिए, वो जस्टिस को सिक्योर कर रहा है, वो लोगों को एम्पावर कर रहा है, वो वल्नरेबल ग्रुप को मेन स्ट्रीम में लेकर आए, वो एम्प्लॉयमेंट की बात करे, वो पॉवर्टी की बात ना करे, वो एक एफिशिएंट डिलीवरी सिस्टम की बात करे. तो ये सारी चीजें क्या हैं, ये सारी चीजें हमें अपने संविधान के पार्ट 4 में भी देखने को मिलती हैं. So far as the part 4th of the Indian Constitution is concerned, it is consisting of the directive principles, and those have been said to be taken from the Irish Constitution. And the very purpose is just to create a welfare state. Or in other words, we can say that the directive principles includes inclusion is just a motivated by the objective of strengthening the status of the person concerned, social democracy, economic democracy of the person concerned. So these are the principles which are important guidelines also, and these are also recommending to the government to follow and to make the laws and to implement the laws and regulations for the country. Because while the constitution was being drafted, then at that time Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he also said that these principles, that is the directive principles of the state policy, these principles constitute new elements of the constitution, because the directive principles are said to be the guidance for the state. अगर हम basically article 36 से शुरू होके और 51 तक ये directive principles हैं constitution में, so we all know that these directive principles are non-justiciable, but they are backed by the common man's voice. आम आदमी की आवाज जो है ये उससे जुड़े हुए हैं, और we can say that these directive principles are the voice of the common man or voice of the people, which are real sanction behind every law in reality. हर कानून के पीछे जो एक real sanction है, जिनको एक कहना चाहिए अधिकार मिला हुआ है, उसी के द्वारा ये हम देखते हैं कि डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ द स्टेट पॉलिसी भी हमारे आम आदमी की आवाज की तरीके से ही लिए गए हैं, बिकॉज discusses the ideals which the state should follow and keep in mind. जब भी वो कानून बनाए, जब भी वो पॉलिसीज को फॉर्मुलेट करें, जब भी देश के लिए लॉज इनेक्ट किए जाएं, उस समय इन डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स को दिमाग में रखना जरूरी है. ये अपने आप में इस डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स के आइडियल्स हैं. सो द डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स आर बेसिकली, you see, a collection of instrument and directions to the state, and they constitute a very, very comprehensive economic, social, political guidelines or principles for the modern democratic states also, that aimed towards including the ideal of justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, or what we say, that is to create the welfare state for the individuals in the country. So directive principles having also certain philosophical foundations for a welfare system in the country, and these principles make it a responsibility of the state to secure it through the welfare legislation. It mentions the protection of the women of the country, environment conservation. It speaks about the rural growth and development, decentralization of powers, uniform civil code. So various things, बहुत सारी ऐसे directions हैं इसमें principles में जो एक good governance की तरफ ही आगे इंगित करते हैं. And they are considered to be the laws which are to be made that is related to the welfare state in the country concerned. So directive principles of the state policy, if we see that they are the source also for the continuity in the governance of the country, because in a democratic system the government changes after regular elections, we all know, and every new government makes different policies and laws for the country. So the presence of these guidelines are very, very important, because they ensure that every government that will follow this set of principles in the form of directive principles of the state policy while formulating the laws. जब भी वो कानून बनाएंगे तो वो इन जो डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स हैं उनको फॉलो करते हुए ही लॉ बनाएंगे. So even though they are not justiciable, they provide a set of guidelines to the government for its functioning in the country, and there may arise a question now that why DPSP are made non-justiciable. So you know that at the time of the drafting of the constitution, there was nothing like directive principles of the state policy, and both part 3rd and part 4th of the constitution, they were designed as the fundamental rights. And it was at that time of the debate in the Constituent Assembly that if all these provisions would be put in part 3rd, that is fundamental rights, which are enforceable in the court of law, then it would not be possible to get them enforced through the courts. Like right to work is there and other rights are also there. So they were made non-justiciable, considering that the state may not have the sufficient or enough resources to implement all these rights. They are the part of the constitution, but they are coming up as the better and for making the better and progressive laws. कि उनको किस तरीके से अच्छे तरीके से लॉ बनाया जा सकता है, इन प्रोविजंस को संविधान में रखा जाना चाहिए, बट नॉट एज ए फंडामेंटल राइट, बट एज ओनली ए डायरेक्टिव्स टू द गवर्नमेंट एंड ऑन इट्स वर्किंग, की वो किस तरीके से काम करेंगी उसको देखा जाए. So we see that the directive principles constitute a manifesto of a nation also. These reflect the ideas and the views which we find that which were there in the mind of the makers of the constitution at the time of the drafting of the constitution, and they reflect the philosophy behind the making of the constitution. So we find that these directive principles also provide very useful information to the courts while interpreting the other provisions of the constitution. जो भी संविधान में जो और प्रोविजंस हैं, जब उनको इंटरप्रेट किया जाता है तो उस समय भी इन डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स को दिमाग में रखते हुए ही इंटरप्रिटेशन कोर्ट के द्वारा किया जाता है, बिकॉज द डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स डू नॉट सीम टू बी वेरी रिजिड इन देयर मीनिंग्स, एंड this also helps the state in interpreting and applying these principles in accordance with the situation which is prevailing at a particular time. So the directive principles provide a good foundation for welfare state, and they help in completing the requirements of a democratic system. And we can say that the inclusion of part 4th in the directive principles of the state policy that provided to be very, very useful for the country's governance. So Article 36 to Article 35, which, as I told you, they are the part of the part 4th of the directive principles of the state policy, and they are there which are strengthening the governance of our nation. So Article 36 is simply speaking about the state as to what shall be the state. The meaning is same as it is for the fundamental rights. वही इसका meaning है जो कि fundamental rights के chapter में दिया गया है. लेकिन इसका जो एक बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल है आर्टिकल 37, जिसके द्वारा इसको नॉन जस्टिसेबल बनाया गया है, लेकिन साथ ही साथ जो उसका प्रोविजन है वो अपने आप में बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, एंड दैट सेज दैट द प्रोविजंस व्हिच आर मेंशन्ड इन पार्ट 4, though that are not enforceable by any court of law, but these principles which are laid down in part 4 are fundamental for the governance of the country. कि जो हमारा देश है उसके शासन के लिए ये जो प्रिंसिपल्स हैं ये बहुत ही बेसिक है, मूलभूत हैं, फंडामेंटल हैं, और इसके बिना कोई भी प्रशासन नहीं चल सकता है. तो आर्टिकल 37 is important in view of the two important things. One, that it is not enforceable by any court of law, and secondly, these principles are very, very basic principles. These are very essential principles for the governance of the country. ये हमारे देश के लिए गवर्नेंस के लिए बहुत important है. So all these fundamental these directive principles of the state policy, if we see that, we can divide them in 3 parts. 3 तरीके के principles इसमें basically जो दिए गए हैं. One is known as the socialist principles, समाजवादी सिद्धांत हैं. Some are the Gandhian principles, also known as the गांधीवादी सिद्धांत. कुछ लिबरल एंड इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रिंसिपल्स भी हैं, उदार और बौद्धिक सिद्धांतों की जो बात करते हैं. तो जहां तक सोशलिज्म की बात है, सोशलिस्ट प्रिंसिपल्स दोज फॉलोज द आइडियलिज्म ऑफ आइडियोलॉजी ऑफ द सोशलिज्म, and that lays down the very framework of India. Its ultimate aim is just to provide the social and economic justice to all the citizens, so that the state can fulfill the criteria which is required for a welfare state. Because governance is related to the democracy, governance is related to the rule of law, and the very purpose of that governance is the welfare of the society. So the very first part of this directive principles of the state policy that speaks about the socialist principles, समाजवादी सिद्धांतों की जो बात करता है, and that is just to bring the welfare state by giving the provisions, by making the laws on the basis of these directions. This is the main aim to provide for social and economic justice to all the citizens. Then the idea is just to give the social and financial equity also, because economic justice is also the part of the same, so financial equity is also required. And with this goal, the state has the liability to accomplish the ideal standards of the government assistance also. So the principles relating to socialist principles, those covered under part 4th of the Constitution, basically Article 38, Article 39 are very important, besides Article 41, 42, 43, 37, 47 is also there. So these are the principles which are making towards, or which are bringing towards or forward the socialist principles. Article 38, for example, speaks about the social, political and economic justice की बात करता है, राज्य के सामाजिक, आर्थिक और राजनीतिक न्याय में सुनिश्चित जो उसकी आय जो है, उसकी स्थिति की, सुविधाओं की, अवसर की समानता की बात करता है आर्टिकल 38 कि स्टेट जो है, दैट स्टेट शुड सिक्योर ए सोशल ऑर्डर which provides social, political and economic justice to all its citizens. And you see that by 44th amendment, one more clause has been inserted to Article 38, which says that state shall reduce inequalities. जितनी भी असमानताएं हैं उनको reduce करने के लिए भी, जो आम आदमी फेस कर रहा है उसको reduce करने के लिए भी provision बनाएगा. Inequalities on the ground of income, inequalities on the ground of the status, facilities, opportunities, जो उनको अवसर नहीं मिल रहे हैं, जो उनको सुविधाएं नहीं मिल रही हैं, उसमें किसी भी तरीके की अगर कोई असमानता है तो उसको रिड्यूस करने के लिए कानून बनाए जाएंगे. इसी तरीके से अगर 39 आर्टिकल को हम देखते हैं तो वो सिंपली मेंशन करता है दैट दिस जो पॉलिसीज बनाई गई हैं वो सभी नागरिकों के लिए उनके जो एक लिवलीहुड की बात करता है कि उनको एडिक्वेट मीन्स ऑफ लिवलीहुड दिया जाए, उनकी जो आजीविका है उसके पर्याप्त साधन उनको प्राप्त हो, और साथ ही साथ जो धन है वो कुछ ही लोगों में कॉन्सेंट्रेट ना हो, उनमें ही केंद्रित ना हो, वो सब में इक्वल बंटवारा हो, कॉमन बेनिफिट फॉर ऑल द पर्सन कंसर्न. और मेल एंड फीमेल, मैन एंड विमेन बोथ, दे शुड गेट इक्वल पे फॉर इक्वल वर्क, दोनों को समान कार्य के लिए समान वेतन प्राप्त हो, महिलाओं को अपने अधिकार प्राप्त हो, उनमें किसी तरीके का डिस्क्रिमिनेशन ना हो, जो लेबर्स हैं उनकी हेल्थ के लिए प्रोविजन किए जाएं, बच्चे हैं, बच्चों के जो बचपन है और जो युवा है वर्ग है उनका कोई शोषण ना हो, so that the health and strength that is possessed by any worker, men, women, or the tender age of the children, that should not be abused, and the citizens should not be forced to enter and to indulge into any of the occupation or any of the profession which is not suitable for their age or strength. कि बच्चों को ऐसे कामों में ना लगाया जाए, उनको कोई हैजार्डस एक्टिविटीज में ना लगाया जाए, उनको फैक्ट्रीज में काम के लिए ना लगाया जाए, just because of the economic necessity, just because of the financial necessity, क्योंकि उनको इकोनॉमिक बैकवर्डनेस है, उनको जरूरत है पैसे की, इसलिए उनको ऐसे प्रोफेशन में काम करने के लिए छोड़ा जाए. तो इस तरीके के वो प्रावधान बनाने के लिए डायरेक्शंस डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स में दिए गए आर्टिकल 39 में. इसके साथ साथ कि एक्सेस टू जस्टिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, कि जो भी लोग हैं उनको समय पे न्याय मिल पाए. तो जिसके पास पैसा है क्या वही कोर्ट में जा सकता है, जिसके पास पैसा नहीं है वो कोर्ट में नहीं जा सकता, वो न्याय की शरण में नहीं जा सकता. सो फॉर दैट द प्रोविजंस आर देयर अंडर आर्टिकल 39A which provides for the free legal aid, that everyone has the right to access to justice. गरीबों को निःशुल्क कानूनी सहायता प्रदान करने की बात कही गई है. It says that the state shall promote justice with the aim of administering justice on the basis of equal opportunity. उसके लिए कानून बनाए गए. नेशनल लेवल पे, डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल पे, स्टेट लेवल पे लीगल सर्विस अथॉरिटीज बनाई गई हैं, so that these persons who are not having the opportunity to go to the court of law because of the economic necessity, because of the economic backwardness, they may have their right to go to have the justice, because the independence of judiciary and the justice is also a very important factor for the good governance. Then अगर हम बात करते हैं वेलफेयर गवर्नमेंट की आर्टिकल 41 इम्पॉर्टेंट है उस पर्पस से, जो बेरोजगारी के लिए, बुढ़ापा, बीमारी, विकलांगता, जो डिसेबिलिटी है उसके मामले में कार्य करने के लिए कानून बनाए जाएंगे. that basically this is the duty or the obligation on the state to make the effective provisions for securing the right to work in cases of the unemployment or old age persons or disabled persons, जो भी हैं ये, इन सब के लिए कानून बनाए, so that public assistance may be provided to them. And this article is basically implied as a tenet for numerous social sector schemes like social assistance programs, right to food security, old age pension, Manrega, ये सब बनाए गए. So this shows that these principles are strengthening the governance, so that the persons they may be brought into the mainstream and they may have their rights in different nature of the rights. Then Article 42 is important, which speaks about the maternity relief or securing just and human work for the person concerned. Particularly, it relates with the women's maternity relief, कि जो स्थितियां होंगी उनको किस तरीके से सुनिश्चित करे कि वो मानवीय परिस्थितियां होंगी, और जो मातृत्व के लिए जो राहत दी जाएगी उसके किस तरीके से प्रावधान बनाए जाएंगे. So all these points we find in Article 42 of the Constitution. Then besides that कि हर किसी को एक decent standard life जीने का अधिकार हो, Article 43 कहता है कि everybody should get the fair wages, हर किसी को समान रूप से जो तनख्वाह है, wages हैं, वो प्राप्त हो, जिससे कि वो एक decent standard life को जी सके. सभी कामगारों के लिए उनको निर्वाह के योग्य मजदूरी, इतनी मजदूरी जरूर मिले कि जिससे उनका जो जीवन स्तर है वो ठीक तरीके से अपना सुनिश्चित कर सके. It says that the state shall endeavor, स्टेट को ही ये सब चीजें करनी है by making appropriate legislation, लॉ बनाकर उनको इस तरीके से इकोनॉमिकली जो वर्कर्स हैं, जो एग्रीकल्चरल फील्ड में एम्प्लॉयड हैं या इंडस्ट्रियल फील्ड में एम्प्लॉयड हैं, उनको लिविंग वेजेस, उनको फेयर वेजेस दी जाए, इस तरीके के डायरेक्शंस दिए गए हैं. Then 43A, it speaks about the cooperative societies. It speaks about the participation of the workers in the management also, so that they may have the participation in the working of the management. So principles are there. Then 47 article speaks about the nutrition or standard of लिविंग एंड पब्लिक हेल्थ, की हर किसी की हेल्थ में सुधार हो, उनके जीवन स्तर को ऊपर उठाया जा सके, या उनका जो पोषण का स्तर है उसमें किस तरीके से सुधार किया जा सके, इसके लिए भी कानून बनाए जाएंगे, इसके लिए पॉलिसीज बनाई जाएंगी. सो वी सी दैट नेशनल हेल्थ मिशन, मिड डे मील स्कीम, which target the marginalized sections of the society, the children, the women, the weaker sections. So this is all inspired by the directive principles of the state policy, and the purpose is the welfare concept and the social justice to all the persons concerned who are not able to take all these things by themselves. So this article also strengthens the governance in the country. So besides these socialist principles, there are some Gandhian principles also, which also speaks about the governance. Particularly if we see Article 40 of the Constitution, that speaks about the organization of panchayats, कि जो राज्य है उसमें ग्राम पंचायतों को स्वशासन की इकाई के रूप में किस तरीके से संगठित किया जाएगा, उसके लिए सरकार राज्य क्या कदम उठाएगा, इसके लिए प्रावधान किए गए. एंड वी फाइंड दैट बाय 73rd and 74th amendment to the Constitution, we have established the panchayati raj system and in the country. तो हर राज्य में अपने जिलों में उनमें पंचायत का सिस्टम लागू हो गया है, पंचायत में इलेक्शन, पंचायत में किस तरीके से काम होते हैं, सो दैट द गवर्नेंस हैज now coming from the grassroots level. That is the purpose of this, and this is also known as the Gandhian principle, which we find in the Constitution, Part 4 of the Indian Constitution. That is also there. Besides that, Article 43B, जो कि 97th Amendment के द्वारा जोड़ा गया, that speaks about the promotion of the cooperative societies, कि किस तरीके से सहकारी समितियां होंगी, उनके स्वैच्छिक गठन क्या होंगे, उनमें कामकाज का तरीका क्या होगा, उस पर लोकतांत्रिक नियंत्रण कैसे रखा जाएगा, all these things, management of the cooperative societies, and that is all the part, and that is there in the Constitution of India, Part 4. Then besides that, particularly for the weaker sections, how they have to be protected from the exploitation, the SCs and STs, specifically Article 46 talks about that. कि राज्य में जो समाज के कमजोर वर्ग हैं, विशेष करके देखा जाए तो अनुसूचित जाति, अनुसूचित जनजाति और दूसरे जो कमजोर वर्ग के लोग हैं, चाहे उनके शैक्षिक और आर्थिक स्तर पर, तो उनके इंटरेस्ट को किस तरीके से बढ़ावा दिया जाए. So the state shall promote all these things, and the state has to take special care for the educational and economic interest of these weaker sections in the society. That is Article 46. That is also strengthening the governance, because if the persons, they will be provided social justice, and they will be protected against these social injustices if they are not being given the participation in the economy, in the education system, then they would be left behind and they'll not be the part of the mainstream in the society. So Article 46 is important for strengthening the governance by that purpose also. Then 47, that speaks about the nutrition and the standard of living and public health of the person concerned. So if the health is good, then only the person can go to the mainstream, they can work properly, their mind would be working properly, and they will be the part of the mainstream. Then besides that, there are some more articles which are related to the liberal and intellectual principles also, सब कुछ उदार और बौद्धिक principles की तरीके से जिनको कि डिवाइड किया गया है हमारे संविधान में. कहा जाता है कि डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ द स्टेट पॉलिसी, उस पर भी काम करेगी सरकारें, चाहे वो यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड को लेकर हो. आर्टिकल 44 दैट स्पीक्स अबाउट दैट कि जो हमारा भारत का राज्य क्षेत्र है उसमें किस तरीके से एक समान नागरिक संहिता का को सुरक्षित करने के प्रयास किए जा सकते हैं. So this is all what we see, that this is the part of the Constitution. Under Part 4 of the Constitution, they are talking about the good governance in the society. They are talking about bringing the good governance. Then besides that, there are other principles also. Those are relating to the intellectual principles, whether it is related to the liberal and intellectual principles, whether it is related to the environment, wildlife protection, it is related to the monuments and other things of the country. At the same time, the relation of the country with the foreign countries at the international level. कि international level पे कैसे हमारे संबंध रहेंगे दूसरे देशों के साथ, वो भी अपने आप में बहुत important है. बिकॉज जो राज्य की जो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय शांति और सुरक्षा स्थापित करने की बात है उसका प्रयास राज्य करेगा, ऐसा भी हमारा एक डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल है. तो जब तक हम अपने देश में इस तरीके के प्रयास नहीं कर पाएंगे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय शांति और सुरक्षा के, तो गवर्नेंस में कहीं ना कहीं कुछ कमी रह जाएगी. तो इसके लिए आर्टिकल 51 दैट इज ऑल्सो वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट कि दूसरे देशों के साथ किस तरीके से संबंध बनाए रखे जाए, दूसरे देशों के साथ किस तरीके से अपने रिलेशन को सम्मानपूर्ण तरीके से, न्यायपूर्ण तरीके से आगे बढ़ाया जाए. These are the principles which are also available under Part 4 of the Constitution. So we see that the implementation of the directive principles of the state policies, there are various acts and policies have been made since 1950 to bring the good governance in the nation. And various of the articles which I have just discussed, Article 36 to 51 of the Constitution, Then we find that the laws have been made. For example, Minimum Wages Act को बनाया गया, Maternity Benefit Act को बनाया गया, Equal Remuneration Act को बनाया गया. तो जहाँ तक अभी हम बात करते हैं Equal Remuneration Act की या Minimum Wages Act की, तो कुछ ऐसे लेबर लॉज है जो कि लेबर कोर्ट्स में, 4 लेबर कोर्ट्स में बदल दिए गए हैं. लेकिन ये सारे कानून अपने आप में बनाए गए. इसके साथ ही साथ अगर हम देखते हैं कि कुछ प्रोग्राम्स थे, वो इंटीग्रेटेड रूरल डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम थे, चाइल्ड लेबर को प्रोहिबिट करने के लिए लॉ बनाया गया. वाइल्ड लाइफ के लिए नेशनल फॉरेस्ट पॉलिसी बनाई गई, जवाहर रोजगार योजना बनाई गई एम्प्लॉयमेंट के लिए, या इसी तरीके से जो संपूर्ण ग्राम रोजगार योजना है वो भी बीच में आई. महात्मा गांधी नेशनल रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट गारंटी जो प्रोग्राम्स थे वो भी हमारे साथ हैं. तो इस तरीके से अगर देखा जाए तो जो हमारे संविधान के भाग 4 में डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ स्टेट पॉलिसी जो प्रोविजंस हैं विच आर एमिंग टुवर्ड्स द स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ द गवर्नेंस, the governments are also making different laws and policies and programs so that they may work in a good manner. They may bring the social justice, they may bring the economic justice to the society. And these provisions are also related to different aspects like Right to Education Act बन गया. उसी तरीके से जो आर्टिकल 45 में हम बात करते थे राइट टू एजुकेशन की, वो राइट टू एजुकेशन एक्ट के रूप में सरकार ने पारित कर दिया. इसी तरीके से बहुत से पॉल्यूशन फ्री एनवायरनमेंट से रिलेटेड जो प्रोविजंस थे, तो जुडिशियरी भी उसको इंटरप्रेट कर रही है, वुमेन्स के राइट्स को इंटरप्रेट कर रहे हैं. एंड वी फाइंड दैट ऑल दीज थिंग्स आर अवेलेबल in existence, and these laws have been made relating to health, hygiene, livelihood, everything. So we see that the significance of the directive principles of state policy, and that cannot be looked down upon just because these are not enforceable in any court of law. These are the principles which are adding to facilitate the governance and smooth functioning of the country. And it was added to meet the main objectives and to that is the ultimate goal of the country, that is to work for the welfare of its citizens. And there are some important acts, as I told you, which are related to this, which are implementing the directive principles of the state policy, and that are having the importance for all the persons concerned. So these principles are just like a structure which is given to the government. ये जो principles हैं एक structure की तरीके से, एक ढांचे की तरीके से, basic और fundamental तरीके से हमारे संविधान में है, जो किसी भी सरकार को ये structure देते हैं कि वो किस तरीके से अपनी governance को आगे बढ़ाएं. It should be the work to formulate the new laws which are revolving around the structure. Only so that the welfare and the people, welfare of the people can be ensured. So every policy and law that is formulated by the state, that has to meet the standards which are mentioned in this part 4th of the Constitution, because they are not justiciable, but they are implemented in some important acts, as I told you, and they hold the relevance also, they hold the importance also, and they strengthen the governance of the country in our nation. So we find that the governance which aims at the maximum welfare of the citizen. So strengthening the institutions of governance, Parliament is the supreme representative institution in India. The political representatives represents the electorate, and many a times the concerns are expressed on various fronts about the falling standards in the quality of participation, about the proceedings and so on. Hence, we see that there is a need to develop good practices and procedures of parliamentary functioning, and Parliament as a dynamic institution in tune with the changing times. And this all can be done through the good governance. So we find that directive principles, they are the source of the continuity of the governance of the country. And we find that the directive principles, in addition to that, are the fundamental liberties also on the part of the government for offering various political roles, various rights to the person concerned. And this is how we find that these directive principles are strengthening the policies of the governance, and they permit the state to interpret and apply these principles in accordance with the current situation. The directives offers a strong foundation for the welfare state. The implementation of the directive principles help to meet the criteria of the democratic system, we all know. And these guidelines are so national goals and consigns, and whoever winning the election cannot ignore them. जो भी सरकार चुनकर आएगी, पार्टी जो भी पार्टी सरकार में आएगी, वो इनको इग्नोर नहीं कर सकती. These are said to be the national goals. These are said to be the national directives. तो इन सबको देखते हुए ही जब कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली में डिबेट चल रहा था, अल्लादी कृष्ण स्वामी अय्यर, he was one of the member there. He said about these principles that the provisions of Part 4 of the Constitution cannot be lightly ignored by any ministry responsible to the public. किसी के भी द्वारा इसको इग्नोर नहीं किया जा सकता. अगर इग्नोर करेंगे तो अगली बार चुनकर नहीं आ पाएंगे. So it is utilized as a guide for the Union Parliament, for the state legislatures, and the courts employ them to uphold their decisions also. And these provisions have long been a guideline for the government institutions, thereby you see strengthening the governance in the country also. And that is how we find that various laws which have been made under these directive principles of the state policy, those are for the welfare of the common man, those are for making the state as a welfare state, those are for the upliftment of the poor, or for the bringing the persons who are not in the mainstream to bring them in the mainstream. That is how the governance is seen under the Constitution Part 4 of the Constitution of India. So with these words, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my views on this governance and the issues which are related to Part 4 of the Constitution of India. So I would be happy if there is any question on what I have discussed so far.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for such an insightful lecture. And you have delivered the topic is strengthening governance